All right, so hi everybody, welcome to the second ECSprecip event. I'm Lisa Milani, the outgoing chair of the Students and Early Career Scientists Subcommittee of the AGU Precipitation Technical Committee. The idea behind the creation of the ECSprecip subcommittee is to create connections between students and early careers working in the precipitation field, advertise their work through our media channels, help them meet some mid-career, senior career scientists, and more in general, be a reference point for young precipitation scientists. If you are here today, I guess you are already interested in all these things. So if you haven't already done, make sure you join our social media and mailing list. As a reminder, the event has been recorded. That said, first of all, I want to thank Yeonjin Lee for organizing the event. She has been awesome contacting the speakers, organizing all the little details. This event is specifically organized from students and early career scientists for students and early careers. We will present 3 successful scientists in the precipitation field that went through different paths to get where they are, different life experiences, but all having in common love for science. Dr. Randy Chase is a postdoctoral researcher for the University of Oklahoma, working at an NSF AI Institute for Research on Trustworthy AI in Weather, Climate, and Coastal Oceanography. He's a brilliant scientist at the beginning of his career. He got his PhD degree in January this year. Dr. Zeljka Fuchs is a research associate professor at New Mexico Tech and director of the Climate and Weather Consortium. She is a project manager and a pioneer in creative science outreach. A couple of years ago, she gave a talk as a TEDx speaker at TEDx Zagreb. And I have to be honest, as a female scientist, I got emotional watching the recording, but you'll hear more from her in just a minute. Dr. Dalia Kirschbaum, sorry for my pronunciation, is a research physical scientist at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. She is the chief of the Hydrological Sciences Laboratory and the deputy project scientist for application of the Global Precipitation Measurement Mission, just to mention the main roles, but the number of projects, collaborations, and public outreach activities she's involved in are countless. I know her personally. She's a great scientist and a great person with an eye to responsibilities and one to people. I want to welcome and thank these amazing speakers for being here with us today and let them talk a little bit about themselves. Right after their introductions, we will have an open discussion. So please post your questions in the chat or raise your hand, open your mic and camera if you wish. Just a last note, right after the event, we will meet in Gather to Town for an informal virtual gathering. So if you want to stick with us and keep chatting and meet people, just join us. I'll post a link in the chat. So without any further ado, Randy, the screen is yours.
Thank you for that introduction, Lisa. I appreciate it. So I figured, I don't know many people probably on this call, or people don't really know me that well since I'm early career scientist. So I figured I'd take a couple moments to explain where I come from so you can gain some more perspective of who I am and those types of things. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York, which for precipitation is quite interesting because we're home to this lake effect snow phenomena, which is quite world renowned. And I've got some cool pictures when I went to undergrad. This is from one of the tallest buildings in my undergraduate institution, where you could see the snow dumping out of this lake effect band. But from an early age, I knew I was interested in weather. And recently, when I went back home to visit my parents, my mom dug out an old book that I wrote back in like 3rd grade, I guess, named The Spinning Truth of Tornadoes. So originally I was interested in severe weather, evidently, but transitioned to precipitation at some point. I went to undergraduate school at the State University of New York at Brockport, which is 20 to 30 minutes from Rochester, New York, if you know where that is. This is where my meteorology passion grew even further. This is a picture from me from my first AMS. So I really fell in love with the research bug early on. At first, I thought I wanted to be a forecaster, and then I started to do some research and just couldn't get enough of doing the research and couldn't scratch that itch. From there, I went to the University of Illinois, where I studied precipitation, and I worked under Steve Nesbitt and Greg McFarquhar. So while I was at the University of Illinois, I dealt with a lot of the GPM ground validation data sets. So the GIF here on the right is some data from Olympex, which was collected in 2015. And I spent a lot of time looking at radar data and building these snowfall retrievals from the radar data. So it's just an animation of a fancy radar we have where we sample both across the airplane track as well as along the track. And it creates this nice kind of like sonogram of clouds that really captivated me when I was starting my graduate work. And then how beautiful snowflakes are kind of kept me interested in building these snowfall retrievals. I also, the main kind of outcome of my PhD was to improve the GPM snow product. So in 2019, Skowronek-Jackson showed that the GPM snow product is underestimating snow compared to CloudSat, which was a much
That just me that lost Randy?
No, yeah, I lost him too.
There we go. We lost you for a little bit, Randy.
Oh, I apologize. My internet sometimes likes to just drop for a second.
We were at
Can you hear me all right now?
Skowronek-Jackson paper.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the Skowronek-Jackson paper showed that GPM had some low snowfall amounts. So I thought that machine learning could maybe assist in this and build a new radar retrieval to measure snowfall. And so you can compare these two plots here. The top one is my machine learning algorithm, while the bottom is the default operational product from GPM. And in general, I increased the amount of snow everywhere, which was kind of the main result of my PhD. So I was happy with that. Got to dip my toe in a lot of radar stuff, a lot of machine learning stuff. And in the end, I accomplished what I sought out to do. Currently, I work for the NSF AI Institute, which is also named AI2ES, which is a specific institute that is with the goal to benefit humanity by developing these novel physical-based AI techniques, as well as enhancing trust with these techniques. Because a lot of the times users of machine learning, while it can get a little mystified with the methods, because a lot of people just weren't exposed to how the machine learning works in their school. So a lot of times there's this inherent distrust for these methods. So one of the goals of the Institute are to enhance that and allow these different meteorological research and other areas of oceanography and coastal to use machine learning and trust it and make better outcomes for society. So my specific project at OU right now is to do machine learning with severe weather. OU is one of the top severe weather places in the country. So it's not surprising that I'm working on that, but you'll know that I have pivoted quite a bit from my research in my graduate work. So I used to do a lot of precip stuff. So I'm deviating a little bit, but it is interesting nonetheless. So here's just an example of some gridded radar data from a supercell on April 30th. And you can see here on the left, we have a storm that forms. And then we have this convolutional neural network that is taking this storm and saying, hey, I've looked at millions of storm images before, and this one looks familiar of one that makes a tornado. So that's kind of what's being output on the right, is the probabilities are increasing because it looks more like a storm that creates a tornado. And something that I'm going to hopefully do while in my tenure here is to actually leverage AI to teach us something about the patterns of thunderstorms. So the leftmost image here has this characteristic hook echo that we've known for a long time that are associated with tornadoes and severe weather. But one thing that's coming out of the computer science literature are these explainable AI techniques, which are a mathematical way to draw back the curtain, so to speak, of AI methods, so we can dig into, okay, where is the machine learning looking and saying, okay, this region of the storm is important for my decision. So one thing that I'm trying to do is, can we learn from the machine learning, as well as does it use things that we already know is important? Like, is it identifying the hook echo? Is it identifying things like this, the ZDR arc, KDP foots? These are all kind of previously identified patterns that have taken us 50, 60 years to find. So then I just want to take a couple moments to highlight some important parts, if there are any students on the call that have led me to this direction in my career. I think the number one thing, if you're a young scientist in your undergraduate degree, if you want to try research, there are a bunch of undergraduate research opportunities, even for small schools. So I went to a small school with only 2 faculty members. So there really wasn't any research opportunities there, but there's these things called research experience for undergrads. And they're available at a lot of the premier institutions in the United States. Awesome opportunity, and I 100% encourage everyone to apply who's in their undergraduate career. And this is kind of where I got bit with the research bug. I was doing even just ozone transport in thunderstorms in the Amazon. Like, it was something completely random that I had no idea even existed. But it gives you a lot of experience, and it's quite an enjoyable time and can launch your career. Then beyond research experiences, I think programming is very important, even though I know a lot of people kind of are hesitant to program, but I think there's a lot of opportunity out there if you train yourself. And beyond just research career, if you want to be flexible and say, hey, maybe I don't want to necessarily continue doing precipitation research my whole life. Now you have a skill set, you can go do data science. For a lot of these, every single company, it seems these days, are collecting data on their own products, and they need people to help them make decisions on their own products to make more money or whatever outcome of that company. So I think it's very important for the people to learn how to manipulate data, and you can go really far in anything you want to do in terms of our data heavy fields, such as precipitation or anything else in research in general. And this is just a picture of some nice fall streaks from GPM, because GPM's awesome. And then outside of programming explicitly, I mean, think about taking classes outside of meteorology. That's kind of how I got into machine learning. You might be like, how the heck did you even start with machine learning? Did you just like pick it up off of YouTube or something? Well, I actually looked around the University of Illinois, and a lot of universities have really world-renowned computer science departments. And within those computer science departments, there are usually applied classes. So if you look through, do your research, make sure you check Reddit or like some of those other methods, Google, because sometimes professors can be awful teachers. So make sure that they're okay before you jump into a computer science class. Same thing with math and stats. Double check. Sometimes the math and stats class can get super heavy on the theory. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of theory. I suck at proofs. So I made sure to try to avoid those classes, but both of those will give you enough background to kind of jump into machine learning. So I only took 2 classes in machine learning at Illinois, and somehow I'm doing machine learning as an expert at OU. It's been a wild ride. And then lastly, I just want to point out, I mean, most of you probably saw our announcements for the AGU precipitation event tonight on Twitter. But I really want to highlight Twitter as a career building tool, as long as you use it properly. So here's just an example of my page. You know, Twitter is really nice because you can highlight your work. I mean, I don't think anyone would ever see my paper if I don't like go say, hey, I just published this, go look at it. Maybe you'll like it. I don't know, who knows? But it's kind of cool that you can do that rather than having it to go through. I mean, you've spent all this time to get it published. Go share the news of your work. Be excited about it. And then actually, I learn about job opportunities. The postdoc I have right now, I learned about it through Twitter. I had no other method of finding it out. So it's a great opportunity to learn about jobs and new research topics that you could explore. Networking events like this one here, very valuable, and I probably wouldn't have known about it too much if I wasn't on Twitter in these research groups. And then lastly, as a weather weenie, I enjoy being up to date on everything that's happening in the weather. It's such a dynamic thing. So it's nice to see meteorologists from all around the world post things about the weather. So like learning about the metacanes in the Mediterranean a couple of times this summer is something I would never know, because I always have my satellite display on the US. So I wouldn't be able to see those unique phenomena around the world without being on Twitter. So that's what I have prepared. Hopefully I didn't bore too many people with my discussions, but thank you for this opportunity to talk, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
No, I definitely think it was a very interesting presentation and very useful for, early career and students that don't know where to look or what are the first steps out there. So thank you, Randy. All right, so now we have Zeljka. Let's see. There we go.
Here we go, maybe.
Yep.
Can you see my slides?
Sure, yeah.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Yonjin, probably butchering your name, for having me here. And Lisa, thank you for seeing my TEDx talk. I guess I hit the theme of the talk, love and drive for science, because I kept thinking about that while I was putting these slides together to see what I can say to younger scientists, because obviously I'm somewhere mid-career scientist. So I just want to start with saying that recently I was a PI on a big field project called OTREC. We went to Costa Rica, which was really hard for us, to study convection in all types of convection, including the null convection, and of course deep convection with lots of precip in as diverse environment as we could find. And so we picked Costa Rica for that because the Eastern Pacific is so different than the Caribbean. The Caribbean, we have uniform sea surface temperatures. In the East Pacific, we don't. And then we were curious about the effect of the land, as well as on, easterly waves. Do they really cross over coming from Africa all the way to Pacific, or do they maybe form off the coast of Colombia? So this was really the project for me that I enjoy even thinking about now, and just happened before COVID in 2019. And looking back, how that kind of happened for me, I was born in Yugoslavia back then. That fell apart in 1991 after Soviet Union fell apart. Then Yugoslavia decided to do the same. We had a pretty nasty war for a couple of years, and those years were my undergraduate years. But before that, in my kind of school life in Yugoslavian, very rigid school system, I was most of the time bored, and my mom and dad had to come to school very often because they would catch me just staring out the window. Everything they tried to teach me, I kind of got, and they wouldn't give me anything more. And then I went to gymnasium for languages, thinking I'll probably study something with math, so let me not get bored. Then I went to study physics because I didn't want to get bored with math. And then it wasn't until I saw Navier-Stokes equations and fell in love with atmospheric physics. But for me, it was paper and pencil analytical work all the way. And so this image is actually from TEDx talk. This is how I think about our knowledge of the troposphere, with just tiny bit of knowledge in the tropics and much more in mid-latitudes. And then naturally, because I get bored easily, I chose to study tropics, where we also have just a little bit of data. And so that was my second lab, the field projects. So as a graduate student, I came in 1999, I think I came to New Mexico. And that was after I got my degree in Zagreb, in Croatia, just after the war. And after I fell in love with atmospheric physics and finally decided I knew what I wanted to do with my life. And I went to my department chair and told him, I want to be a graduate student. I want to study this forever. And he said, and we knew each other pretty well by then, like there wasn't that many of us in the class, maybe 15. And he said, Zeljka, you're a woman and you're going to get married and you're going to have kids. And I think some 9-to-5 job at the weather station would be the best for you. And I got so mad. And I just stared at him and I said, are you serious? And he said, yes, I'm serious. I'm doing you a great favor. And I said, well, I'll see you when we are going to be colleagues. And I slammed the door, went home to cry, and then had a splendid idea of going for graduate school in US because I was an exchange student in high school. So just my mind went to US and I applied to several schools, got into New Mexico Tech, where my advisor was Dave Raymond, incredibly great scientist and a very patient advisor who kind of followed me in all my adventures and who was my co-PI on OCHEC as well. And this image is from 2001 EPIC project where I was, there were two of us. There were two female graduate students. And one of the planes that we flew, we had C-130 and P-3. And C-130 did not have a bathroom. And boys went somewhere behind the wall. Girls had to hold for 8 hours. So that was kind of my graduate years. Professionally, I discovered that I really loved field projects and not only the theory, and that I learned how to appreciate every data that we ever collect. When you crunch data and you get frustrated very often, knowing that you can go back and how much work it took to gather that data really helps. To kind of prove the point to my former department chair, I had my son few months before I defended my master's thesis. Then I had my daughter, and I had Lyra just after I defended my PhD thesis. So a little bit of them in the middle. It's the photo from Croatia, because after I graduated and did my postdoc, I decided that I kind of need to give back to my home country, everything I've learned and all the connections I have established. So I went back to Croatia and I was a professor at the University of Split there for 8 years. But before I did that, I just want to mention one day of my career, and that was right after I defended my PhD thesis. So I was a postdoc and I was pregnant with my third child, and I was in Monterey at the conference giving a talk on my thesis, which I was searching for Kelvin waves, but I stumbled upon moisture modes. And so, I presented my model, and in the concluding remarks, I remember this as it was yesterday. Through my head, it was going like, do you want to say that this moisture mode might be connected to the Madden-Julian oscillation? And I was thinking, well, if not now, then when? It's not the same as if you make a mistake when you're 20-something as when you are 50. So I decided to perhaps make that mistake. And I said, so I think the moisture mode resembles the Madden-Julian oscillation and might be the main physical mechanism behind it. To which, and this is probably a very young crowd, but there was a very esteemed colleague, a mathematician, Andy Maida, who in front of this was probably the biggest audience I ever had, about 400 people, stood up and said that this is all worthless and that I should go and read his papers, which of course I read. It was my thesis, so I did lots of research on it. He trashed me in such a mean way that everybody remembered my talk. And as perhaps you don't know, but moisture modes are very relevant for the Madden-Julian oscillation. And so today, everybody remembers, and when they introduce me lots of times when I'm giving a talk, they say, I first heard of Zeljka Fuchs when she said that the moisture mode might be the Madden-Julian oscillation. So that day, really on that day seemed like the worst day of my life. turned out to be maybe the biggest favor of my career. So just, to note, don't despair if something happens like that. Couple of slides from my life in Croatia. As living on 2 continents is not really easy. Going back and forth, you get used to something. You have colleagues, you have network, and then you go back to Europe. So what I did was because I felt isolated from US and from my former colleagues, I did every year I held a workshop on one island. So everybody wanted to come. Kerry Emanuel, Ed Zipser, Eric Maloney, and whatnot, they would come, and we had a ratio graduate student lecture one-on-one. Lecturers could talk about whatever was the closest to their heart. So whatever research was that they were doing right then, they talked about that, but the students got to work with them prior to the workshop, like several months prior to the workshop, and then they would present their results. And we did trips, and we did dinners and dancing and bonding. And I have so many new colleagues, early stage colleagues from those workshops who came as students and then built their own careers, and who also helped us in OCHEC, because one of them ended up in Colombia. And then another thing I did was I started organizing the festival science, because it seemed to me that in Croatia, regular people did not care about science, which is actually true here in the US, but it became, I don't know why it was so obvious over there. So what we did, we brought science to the streets. And this is an example when we were launching a hot air balloon from the center of Split, from the Riva. And truly, like, science came out on the streets, like, people in Europe go for ice cream, coffee, or window shopping. So this is where we brought science, and it was pretty cool to do that. And I had numerous European projects, but eventually my kids got bigger, I got divorced and bored again, and decided to go back to US. And everybody thought I was crazy for leaving my beautiful job and beautiful town and whatnot. But to me, it made sense. I wanted to do something really, really important and really big, and I wanted to work with my team. And part of my team was Dave Raymond, who supported me. When I told him that I'm pregnant with the 3rd child, like, his jaw literally dropped, and his wife had to, kind of like close his jaw, because he knew it was really hard to balance the kids and the career. And lots of time while I was in the US, my first husband was in Croatia, so I was pretty much alone with them. But the way I always dealt with it is I took them everywhere with me. I took them to the conferences. I took them to Costa Rica for the field trip. I kind of grew up on the set, let's put it that way. I had lots of help with my senior colleagues, like, for instance, George Kaladis would babysit my kids when he saw that I really had to talk to somebody seriously. So that kind of worked out. These are just a few more photos from OCHEC and outreach, which I think is really important. And during OCHEC, because I had to deal with so many levels, and the NCAR and the pilots and the mechanics and the this and the that, and I was a woman, and Dave Raymond is a man and older and more respectable, of course. So whenever we had to talk about OCHEC, he talked about outreach part, and I talked about pure science part, because everybody would assume it's going to be the other way around. This is just one of the things that just, unfortunately, we still have to work on and not care, right? Like, why would outreach be just a woman's job? Finally, a couple of images from my kids, who are today teenagers. Martin is in South Korea doing study abroad. He goes to Pomona College in California. Sarah, my middle child, who adores animals, is competing on dressage shows and going in fall to Virginia to an amazing school with a dressage club, with a trainer that was in the Olympics. And then my youngest, Lara, who shaved her head during COVID. She's that brave and is 15 and is going to college in fall, graduating school. Well, she's still 15, I guess. So I think they're pretty happy. They were pretty happy with my choices. And finally, I just want to say it's not easy to find balance between work and between your personal life. One would say it's never a good time to have kids. One would say it's always a good time to have kids. It's probably a personal decision for everybody. For me, it really worked well because I'm a kind of person that loves to multitask, but not 10 things at the same time. I just really passionately work when I work on something. And if it would have been only kids or only work, I think I would have felt lonely. So for me, it worked. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and here for questions now or after Dalia gives her talk.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Really appreciate you sharing all this. Dalia, last but not least.
That was amazing. Well, you guys inspired me, so I made slides too. All right, let's see. Well, thank you. That was unbelievable. What important stories that you told everybody, and I just you both are very inspiring in your work. And so let me tell you a little bit about me. So I originally I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is me when I was little at Kennedy Space Center, and you know, I always was interested in a lot of things, but one of the things that I gravitated towards the most is math. And so I remember kind of taking, you know, the scrap sheets of paper that they would leave, and I would turn them over because they had math problems on the back. And I would like come in when I was in 3rd grade and, you know, pretend to do my math homework. And fast forward, I have a daughter who's 9, and I caught her doing it the other day, and I was like the proudest mom ever. But that's besides the point. We'll get to my kids. So I was really interested in math in high school. And so I actually went thinking that I was going to go into math in college. So I went to Princeton, and I had an advisor who was a math professor. And so I told him I was interested, and he put me in this. He suggested I take this super advanced math, talk about proofs. The first thing that I had to do, my first assignment in college, was prove that 1 was greater than 0. And he's like, it has to be under 3 pages. I'm like, you have an apple, you eat an apple, you have no apples. That's my proof that 1 is greater than 0. And so I realized very quickly that that really wasn't, I was more into applied work. So I kind of batted around with some economics. I met my husband the first day of school. And so he was really interested in economics, and I was falling asleep. And then I happened to find a class my freshman year about environmental issues. And we were talking about the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, and we're talking about erosion, beach erosion, and paper versus plastic, and hurricanes, and why they preferentially seem to impact trailer parks. And I was at the edge of my seat for every lecture, and I turned, and my future husband is falling asleep. And I said, okay, so now I get it. And so, you know, that professor was amazing. And so I went to him and I said, I am really interested in this field. How do I get into it? And he said, you know, go and you can major in geosciences, which I did. And he said, you can go to graduate school and really focus on natural disasters. And that was really my passion. And so, you know, I did some internships when I was an undergraduate at Columbia University, where I met my future thesis advisor, Art Lerner Lamb. And so I went and introduced myself and said, I'd like to come work with you as a student, and then kind of continued to be in touch with him. And so when it was time to apply to grad school, I said I would love to apply. And so it worked out, thankfully. And so I was able to pursue a PhD in natural hazards and geomorphology and climate and remote sensing. And so as I was there, you know, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and wrote a proposal to NASA as a graduate student. And right now it's called Finest. If anyone's interested, the Finest proposals are due February 11th. And it was a fantastic opportunity to have funding and write a proposal and then have funding through NASA to fund my graduate career. And that's really what got me into kind of talking with people at NASA. So the theme you can see here is I ended up going during graduate school to do a internship at NASA in NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, working with Krista Peters-Ledard. And she was the one that suggested, suggested me coming to Goddard. And so after I graduated, there's a picture. After I graduated from Columbia University, I did a NASA postdoctoral program fellowship at NASA Goddard, which was a fantastic program. And when I was there, I showed up to things. So one of the things that they had was a lot of the people in the mesoscale atmospheric processes branch, where Lisa is, they would go out to eat at a place called Three Brothers Pizza. And so I was a young, postdoc, and I said, you know what, I should just show up and talk to them. And so I did. And so, learning about what they did, it was a really casual conversations. I asked how I could get involved in GPM. And so with GPM, I was talking to the project scientist, Arthur Howe, who's unfortunately passed away. And I said, I'd really like to get involved in understanding, how I can work with GPM, since I had done trim in my research, which I'll talk about in a second. And he said, why don't you come on board and you can do some applications work. You can work with some of our education activities, and then you can continue your own research as well. And that's what I did. So this is actually me in front of GPM as it was fully assembled, before it shipped to Japan for the launch. And I've been with the GPM mission for the last decade now, working on a whole bunch of different topics. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I do research on, because I think it kind of talks about my career path as well. So when I was in my graduate school, I was looking at different hazards, and I was trying to figure out, how can we look at remote sensing data in a new way to understand hazards? And landslides were really one of those hazards that weren't really studied. They were studied very locally, lots of studies locally, but I'm like, but what about the bigger picture? And that's always been kind of my focus. How do we understand the bigger picture? And so, what we take is we take a landslide, we can look at the driving forces, we can look at the slope, we can look at vegetation, we can look at the triggering forces like rainfall and soil moisture, and we really can model these processes. And so what I did early on, and I actually had some younger kind of high school students working with me, is the first thing you want to know when you're modeling something is where do landslides occur? And so we built this database, which now we have over 15,000 points, all based on media reports, to really get a global database of landslides. And one of the things that happened very early in my career was we needed a database, and I contacted somebody in Europe who didn't know me from anybody. And I said, I'd really love to work with you on your database that you're developing for landslides. Could we collaborate? And I still remember his email. He said, I've been burned by Americans before. No. And I'm like, okay, that's one approach. That's fine. And so I didn't take no for an answer. I just did my own and kept in touch. And the funny thing is, we're now colleagues and very respectful of each other. But I think that, one of the things that I learned is that if you have kind of this view that's a little different from everybody else in the field, sometimes that's sometimes that may be a harbinger of things to come, but oftentimes maybe it's a window into something new. And so I would go and present on our global landslide susceptibility work and the work that we've been doing with modeling. And I remember 10 years ago, AGU, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, I presented on our new global analysis right out of, working on my thesis and such, and I got crickets. Nobody asked me a question. Nobody talked to me. There weren't very many women presenting at all. And I literally walked out of there and said, am I doing something wrong? And it was less so in Europe, but when I would go to EGU, nobody was doing this. And so I was trying to figure out, am I doing something that's so off the wall that nobody should be doing it? Or am I doing something that nobody can for any number of reasons? Maybe they're not being funded to do it. Maybe, that's not what their focus is. So ultimately what I decided to do is take, information from GPM, from precipitation, and combined it to really understand the evolution of landslides around the world. And so now we have a team that we've grown to look at how we can model these processes. We work with local groups like Rio de Janeiro. We work with Southeast Asia and Nepal. It makes for late nights on calls, but it's worth it to really help advance this field. And so that's something that I feel, looking around the room today at AGU and seeing the young, diverse group of scientists that were there. I didn't have that kind of person to look to see, some of the maybe bigger picture ideas that maybe sometimes work, sometimes don't. And so it was really fun to see a different group than I saw 10 years ago. And we're also trying new things like citizen science. How can we really think outside the box to get more data into our system? So we have a system called Landslide Reporter, which helps us understand kind of these capabilities. So another thing that I do in my job, in addition to leading a landslide program, is I work very closely with GPM. I've built their capabilities in outreach. I think it's such an important comment about why do women do outreach? Well, we highlighted all the different types of people and of ways in which we can identify STEM careers, science careers across the board, and work with some amazing professionals in communications. And so I think really trying to give and amplify the message of how can we get the word out there about NASA data, about GPM information, and have a lot of different mouthpieces for that information is key. So we've built a ton of resources, and I also do a lot of outreach. So this, I kid you not, the top image was supposed to be a big billboard in my hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It would have been hilarious, but then the sequestration, a lot of government politics happened, and so they never let them have the billboards put up, but it was going to be this gigantic billboard of me holding a globe, which is amusing. I narrated, the GPM launch. I was in the studio narrating it. I do a lot of live shots, and I love that. But the other thing I do in my career is I'm chief of the Hydrological Sciences Lab. So I started that about 18 months ago. I keep adding hats to my activities. And honestly, talking about getting bored, I'm definitely never bored because I'm able to use different parts of my brain to lead people, to motivate people, come up with new ideas, and work with satellites and the next generation of satellites. But all in that time frame, I have my kids. So I had 3 kids while I was working at NASA in the Hydrological Sciences Lab. I got married when I was there, and I asked somebody who will not be named. I said, I need to change my name on my badge. How do I do that? And he said, we've never had to do that before. I'm like, you're kidding. He's like, nope. So I think that there's definitely some opportunities to educate people, but also to just say, okay, well, then I'll be the first. And so I think that has been a very stabilizing force. I have a 9, 7, and 4-year-old that keep me very busy. And I think that balance is ephemeral. I think that you're never going to be perfectly balanced on anything. But I think that as long as you devote yourself to making a commitment in some ways or another, I think it's really important. And so this is my helper at work, at home. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, I want to make some notes. So the roles of mentors. I had some amazing mentors that allowed me to get internships and really guide me in my career. Please seek those out. They are fun. They're such important people to have in your life, and you will always have them to help guide you. Persistence and showing up, right? You don't know what you don't show up for. So just be present and seek out opportunities. Being strategic in your ideas. If there's an off the wall idea, don't discount it. I mean, obviously, if it's so off the wall, ask first, consult somebody, but bringing people in to grow teams and really build those ideas, especially if they're kind of a little bit different, is exciting, and that's what moves the field forward. If you're a leader, if you get into leadership positions, listen before talking. There's so many different opinions out there, especially in this virtual world. People communicate differently, and so you always want to be able to be there as a listening. Listen to where they're coming from before you make a judgment or assume you know what's going on. And then I think that the last thing is it doesn't ever hurt to give someone a pat on the back and recognize their accomplishments, even somebody that's more senior, because I think everybody needs positive encouragement, and a pat on the back, virtual or otherwise, goes a really long way. And so if you can kind of be that colleague that reaches out to others and boosts them up, I think it just says wonders about who you are. And so I found that time and time again, people really appreciate that regardless of how old they are. So with that, I'm going to stop because I know we have time for questions. So thanks.
That was definitely incredible. Thank you, guys. This was a really, really good introduction, I would say, to some sort of discussion. If we want to ask questions, feel free to write in the chat, unmute yourself, show yourself on the video. But yeah, I'm just speechless. Thank you. Oh, there's a hand up, Fraser. Or Fraser, sorry. I always read your name, never pronounce it. How is it?
That's all right. I get it a bunch of different ways. If you're at Starbucks, sometimes they call me Fruger, but usually I go by Fraser. I had a question for Randy. Yeah, all the presentations are really, really informative today. Randy, I was wondering, we're actually doing some similar work with neural networks, looking at precipitation retrievals, more with CloudSat. And I already downloaded your paper, by the way. I'm reading it right now. But I had a question sort of about your background. I come from more of a CS background and have sort of transitioned into this this sort of geography PhD. And I find one of the hardest things for me is sort of figuring out, answering questions about the actual science and the physical processes and that sort of thing. And I have more of a strength personally with the programming and that sort of thing. And it sounded like you were almost maybe the reverse of that, where you had more of a geography background and then we're learning the computer science aspects as you went. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but I was wondering how you overcame some of those challenges and how that sort of affected the path you took to your PhD.
Yep. Fraser, you're right. Yeah, I come from a weather weenie background, 100%. Yeah, my undergrad was very focused on synoptic meteorology, just because, like I said, there was only 2 faculty members there. So we had a jet dynamicist and then radar / severe storms type of person to cover the kind of the whole basis of meteorology. So I guess, yeah, that's the one thing that now I'm interfacing more with computer scientists, because I'm actually technically in the computer science department at OU now, because my PI is Dr. Amy McGovern, who is a computer scientist by trade. So I do see this more often as the questions of radar data. When you're looking at radar data, something that I've known for a long time as an artifact of radar sometimes can be overlooked by someone who has more of a computer science background. So I mean, in terms of overcoming, I think just having discussions with people who might be like, if you and I want to chat sometime about your research, if you're not feeling, if you want to just tell me about it and I could point maybe some things out that maybe you might have missed, or I hope you have other people like that in your research group to just kind of just talk about it, right? And that's how those things are caught, because yeah, in graduate school, you don't want to go 3-4 years in a tiny niche in your group and overlook something that might, 3 reviewers later down the road will say, oh, no, that's completely garbage. You don't want to waste those time. So it'd be good to just talk about it early. I think that's kind of the suggestion I would say. I mean, interact with people that you want to so interact with more of the meteorological community and discuss on those types of ends. And I think that's the easiest way to, unless you're a different type of learner. If you are a reader, then maybe start reading more just general meteorology type things. But personally, I learned a lot more from communication and visual audio type of things. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I see Yeonjin with her hand up.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks everyone for such a great talk. I'm really touched by all the talks, and I'm kind of a little bit motivated from the talk, because it's been a year since I started my postdoc, and recently I was kind of discouraged and not well motivated to do research, and I started thinking is my research really worth it? Should I continue doing this? And I think we always have ups and downs when we do research, and I was wondering how did you guys overcome when you get to this point and stuff? I guess this is a question for all 3 of you.
Yeah, I'll start. We've all had ups and downs, and I forgot to say this, but I often say it. I think being a graduate student and later on a researcher is one of the loneliest jobs on this planet. And if you get your PhD where you're really, I mean, okay, you have an advisor, but you're working on a problem that nobody has ever solved before. And at some point you have to know more than your advisor. So he or she can't help you anymore. And, you know, you spend these days and days, and then COVID hits, and then you have even less interaction with everybody else. And unless you are extremely like driven and it's in your heart, you don't get a PhD, and you shouldn't get a PhD, because I think it's only for people who really love it as so much that they subject themselves to that kind of torture or love at the end. So I would say if you have a PhD and you love what you do, you will learn how to deal with ups and downs, and teams and colleagues and talking and sharing, just saying what you just said, I think helps, because we've all been there like so many times. It's crazy. Like you know, once upon a time I was a dean for research in Split, because I was like, maybe, you know, maybe I did all that I have in research. Maybe, you know, I'm a great manager. Maybe this is where my future is. Or, you know, when I was teaching a lot, I would be like, maybe this is my career. You know, it's easier to measure what you've done. It's easier to feel happy at the end of the day because it's instantaneous, right? But in my life, and sometimes it took years. Like when I was a dean for 2 years. And then I realized that this is going to be the end of me as a researcher, and wrote a proposal and came back to New Mexico Tech for the summer and rediscovered my love for research. So that was before my field project OCHAC and all that. So I think we all struggle with that. We all have that. And it's awesome to talk about it. Hope this helps.
Well, and I might just add that that, you know, sometimes, you know, I love doing research. You know, I think it's great. But I really kind of like to do a lot of different things. And so I think that if you get in a rut, which is totally normal, I think that you just start talking to other people, virtually or otherwise, to get new ideas, to say like, you know what, I'm getting stale on this idea. Like, let's try something else. Let's move in a different direction. Let's think about something. And honestly, I can't underestimate the importance of taking breaks, right? So especially at this time, that's what I tell my lab. It's so important to get refreshed. And so you get in a spiral of like, I'm just so done with what I'm doing. And then you take a week or two and you think about something else and you go somewhere else and you kind of have a new perspective. And so I think that that is really important, graduate school and undergrad all the way up. And I know that, you know, sometimes it's not valued, but it is so important to be able to just step away, because there are a lot of things either bigger or different than what you're doing. And sometimes you get kind of blinders on to not see it. And so I think that I definitely encourage that part of it as well, because, you know, life is a lot of different components. It's not just work. Like, there are workaholics, that's great, but like, it's not just work. And so there's other parts of it that you can find joy in, and then you go back to finding the joy in what you're doing in your research.
Yeah, and just to add on to all this discussion, I personally identify with that exact same sentiment, Eugen. So for those who don't know, I actually, one silver lining of COVID is that I am doing my postdoc completely remote. I'm actually located in Phoenix, Arizona. So I've felt very isolated actually during this time, even with trying to build a local network. I went over to Arizona State University just to chat with, you know, like-minded researchers, just to, you know, build something in person, because us as humans are very social creatures. But I think something that inspires me is these discussions right here. I mean, the other two talks made me super excited to get back to doing research. I myself, at postdoc, is one of the most tumultuous times, I think, is, okay, here you have 1 to 2 years to accomplish this brand new topic that you haven't spent any time thinking about really, but also halfway through that, you have to start applying for jobs. Oh, and then on top of it, you also have to kind of decide if you want to be a faculty member or if you want to leave academic world and go to the private sector. Because if you go to the private sector and don't publish, then you can't come back. Huh?
Or government.
But if the government, I talked to people at Marshall and they were much more accepting if I didn't keep publishing every year. versus if you don't publish every year, then I feel like R1 institutions will cross you off their list immediately. It's quite unfortunate that there's so much stress at this point in our career on postdocs that you have to publish, you have to do all these things. It's mind-boggling to me. But having a network of scientists like you're doing here, and if you want, I can add you to this postdoc cohort that we kind of built up at the AI Institute monthly, just around random things. So I think misery loves company, and it kind of helps keep everyone motivated.
I would like to say that those are the first world problems, and you should be happy to have them. I mean, what you want to do eventually will come clear one way or another. I left US, I went back to Croatia. That was my postdoc crisis. I just couldn't see myself. Like, you know, I would come on Friday at 7 p.m. to my babysitter, and my kids would be sitting around the table. My babysitter would be opening a beer for me because I was so exhausted after the whole day, because I was doing postdoc and also teaching. I was kind of like postdoc / visiting faculty. And you know, and then I had a weekend with them. They were so little and so cute, and I hated leaving them on Monday, but I also hated leaving my work on Friday. And one day I asked myself, like, Zeljka, what are you doing? Like, it's been 6 months and it seems like it's been a month only. Like, you are doing what you love, but it's just going so fast. And you know, pause. And so to me, pause was, it just all came together, right? I also didn't have a green card. I mean, I was on the student visa, then I was on H-1B visa, then getting a green card, going from H-1B, like, you know, you have to plan so far in advance and always be at the top of everything and get the permanent job, make sure that blah, blah. I mean, it's so much, right? Find the job where you're gonna actually like being. But none of it has to be exactly like that, right? So that path, and I know it's harder for your generation. There are more of you and there are less jobs. And I frankly don't know how I would cut it if I had to start over now. So, you know, kudos to you. What I said, it's a good problem to have. But it's an interesting one. And it's a one that I think you are all capable of figuring out, and through that get the best out of yourselves. You know, go somewhere where you're, you know, it's calling you to go, and it's not forever. You can always change. I mean, you have a PhD in, I don't know, math, physics, meteorology. You know, this is top of the world, right? You can do whatever you want, whenever you want. So don't sell yourselves too short. Thanks.
I guess the uncertainty that I'm like both excited to explore things, but at the same time, I want the permanent job to be like stable and settle down. So I guess this uncertainty is making me kind of stressed out. I have lived my life by saying there are no permanent jobs.
Yeah, same thing here.
Yeah, and I got my green card as a person of national interest and not through the job. Or through later, I married an American. And my son is turning 21 soon. So, you know, I had all these paths afterwards. But it's hard to plan your whole life now, right? Yes.
Mm-hmm. I see Sai has her hands up, or he's, sorry.
So hello. My question was, I'm sorry, him. I
apologize.
No. I take no offense at all. Don't worry. So my question was to the seniors actually, and I must be very honest, brutally honest. One reason why I joined this particular working group is in some sense, one, I was recommended by a colleague who thought the speakers were really good and I should take a look. But two, also it was in some sense a completely different sect from the groups that I have been, that are very familiar to me, that have known me since my PhD, and I completely wanted to get away. And this question that I'm going to ask, I hope it's the right audience, because it's completely not the audience that I've grown up over my PhD and at least half of my postdoc. This question is really about mistakes and about how you've constantly dealt with rejections as you keep proposing nonstop. And I'm asking this because apparently, I mean, at the end of my PhD, I defended my thesis and I started my postdoc. I figured that I had actually made a mistake, a silly averaging error, but that went through many of my papers. And so now I'm spending whenever I can mentally, whenever I'm stable, I'm able to just go and send these corrigendums one by one, try to rectify the mistake. And one thing that scares me is because I'm at JPL and I've had my fair share of successes. I'm not going to deny it. But when I look forward, I'm seeing that a better part of our jobs is submitting these proposals nonstop and having to deal with rejections and people pointing out these rejections. I mean, out and out and out again and again every single year. And again, it's really frightening in the sense that how will I be able to deal with these rejections? Because I couldn't deal with myself for having made a stupid averaging error during my PhD, and I was really, really critical about myself. So I thought, how did you guys, I mean, because all of you clearly, like a lot of you are writing about having been NASA doctoral fellows. I was one myself. I'm also a NASA postdoc. So yes, I mean, I've written my share of proposals, although they're just a handful. But I realize if I'm going to be at JPL for the long term, I'm going to do this for my living nonstop, and my career is going to depend on it. So I'm going to have to be better at taking rejections. How have you all gotten better at taking rejections, and at what point did this not, I mean, hurt at all? And how did you deal with yourself?
It always hurts. If you care for what you do, it always hurts. I mean, every project is like a mini PhD, or you know, you give a piece of yourself in every paper, in every proposal. It's a huge part of you. And then somebody out there says, no, this is all crap. And then they say it in a very mean way. I, as a reviewer or a panelist, doesn't matter whether it's a paper or a proposal, I am never harsh on people because I know how much work is behind every proposal or paper. Might disagree with something. I might even say that I don't believe in that work, but if I don't find anything wrong with it, it's publishable or fundable. Yeah. And then furthermore, I always try to point out what a person can do better to maybe get funded next time. But Sai, it's always gonna hurt. If it doesn't hurt, you are in the wrong job. It's gotta hurt. It's what makes you better. It's what makes you move forward. I mean, like recently, NASA project, there was CPEX 1 and 2, and I was on CPEX 1 and I didn't get CPEX 2. It hurt, but, you know, CPEX 2 then turned out not to be, you know, it had its problems and whatnot, and I had my old check and everything turned out for the best. You can't know. Certain things just happen. Like 3 years later, you see, well, you know, maybe this was not a project for me. But you know, I'm a research professor, and I love the fact that I'm a research professor. I was a tenured faculty in Split, and I found it boring. So now, now where, you know, I'm my own boss. I go and I do what I want to do, and I find money for it. And that I can do that now. 10 years, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I couldn't have done it back then. So what I'm trying to say, you'll change. You'll find your way. My best advice is, you know, just trust your drive or love or whatever it is in doing your best, but don't make yourself miserable over it. And failure, everybody will tell you. And I have asked that Dave Raymond and recently Kerry Emanuel, and, you know, I'm like, how do you deal with this? And especially, how do you deal if somebody is mean while they're saying no? You know, like when they kind of act like they know better, like they how, you know, I worked hard on this. Why do you think you are so much? You know, maybe you are, but not so much. They have all dealt with it. I have colleagues who are gonna, retire sooner than later because of some disagreements, whether it's over research, politics, or whatever. It's normal. It's normal. It's a normal part of work, I think, that people don't talk about. You give an inspirational talk, and of course you're going to just talk about the good stuff. You're not going to talk about the bad stuff.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll just add one more thing. Sorry, I had to move. I have to go to a panel. I'll add one thing is that a strategy that I use is try to create a diversified portfolio of stuff, right? So when you're a grad student, you're focusing on one thing, but I think as you broaden your career, you don't want to have a single point of failure. So if you can think of different ways to find funding, different programs, I never just apply to one program. I always apply to like 5 different ones because you never quite know. And so I think if you can be creative and think about outside the box of how your research could, have a new spin on a different area, that actually could be a really winnable proposal just because they haven't thought of it in that way. And so I definitely would encourage you to be creative about where you seek out funding because, the place you're banking on might not work and then you're kind of stuck. So.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah.
I see Rick when he's hand up.
Yeah, thanks. For those of you with families, I guess I'm interested if you have any tips on balancing career ambitions with the partner's career ambitions and with desire to spend time with your kids and families, and how's that gone for you all?
Yeah, Rick, thanks for that question. Dalia, do you have to go? Do you want to go first?
I'm going to have to jump in an Uber, but I'll just keep talking because they won't care. I would say that it's never balanced, but it's how you approach it. And so I think that you just, I'll give you an example. I have decided that I will not work in the evenings. Sometimes I have to work late for a call with Asia or to catch up on emails, but pretty much I don't work on the weekends, and I don't work evenings unless I can, help it. So I draw the line there because my kids need me and their attention. They're little. And so I think I've always been really intentional there. And in terms of a spouse, it's all about communication, right? It's no career is better than somebody else's. And if that's what the kind of focus is, then I think it's just about communication as much as possible. Because, you might have late night calls and then your spouse or partner might have late night or have to do something else. And that understanding that balance and agreement between the two of you is the most important. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, for me, it was different because I was a graduate student and I was very, very often without the husband, and I just worked every time when the kid wasn't sleeping or when the kid was sleeping, I was working, whether it was day or night, and I was young and I had that energy. But I, as I said, I took them everywhere. And one of the things that I find different still between men and women, and it's cool that you asked the question though, I see lots of young women in the field. I see lots of students. I see lots of postdocs. And then after that, I see less and less women and more men. And I've seen today at the AGU many colleagues of mine, and some have little kids, and nobody brought their kids, nobody brought their family. Whereas, I always did because I had nowhere else to go, to put them. I think it's great to encourage that. I know that AGU and AMS encourage that, and they sometimes provide daycare and this and that, but I don't think in the mindsets of people, it's still there. And it should be like a given. And because I think it's doable. I mean, it's not like we are the doctors that really have to go somewhere at 3 a.m. I mean, we are doctors, but not medical. We're not surgeons, but you don't have to go somewhere at 3 a.m., or somebody's going to die. This paper or this review does not have to take place right now. It can be in a week. So finding a balance is really, I think, in our head when and what to choose to do. And it's a choice. It's not an easy one. And there is no perfect balance, like Dalia said, but it's a choice and it's doable.
Yep. While I don't have quite a large family at this moment, I think one thing that keeping perspective of the career field is changing. I think, remote postdocs were not a thing really. And I asked my PI, Dr. McGovern, I'm like, would you have hired me if COVID was not going on? Would you even thought of hiring a remote postdoc? Because the reason I'm doing the remote postdoc is because my partner is a pharmacist and she's doing a residency at a hospital where she does have to go take care of patients. And I'm like, well, my career, I can keep my career by sitting at a computer all day, where you can't do that. So the communication aspect, I think is 100% how you should approach it. But yeah, and I think going forward, this remote work world that we're currently shifting into is becoming a much more fruitful option. Whether I know academic positions are kind of harder, but private sector 100%, I guarantee you is jumping on the train of remote work. Joe Munchak, who used to work at NASA Goddard, is now at tomorrow.io. And I was talking to him last week, and it sounds like a great opportunity for scientists outside of the normal PhD routes to have this life balance as well.
Yeah, my postdoc advisor is going to be remote too, and I'm excited. The reason for it is similar to yours. I need to stay close to where my partner's job is. So I'm excited that these opportunities are opening up, but at the same time, it is a little stressful to be entering into such, like we were talking about earlier, such a crucial period of research productivity, while also being kind of disconnected from those in-person interactions.
Yeah, my university, New Mexico Tech, has a huge problem because of that. It's a two-body problem, as we call it, and we are trying to, especially if people are both in PhD, have a PhD in any kind of science, we are trying to give a job. If we offer somebody a job, then we are trying to offer a spouse a job as well, because that's the only way we can keep them. Like in my time, right, my husband started a business in Croatia, and he was there, and I was in New Mexico, and that was okay. I think newer generations don't think that they have to live like that, and why should they? So the two-body problem is, and plus more women have careers, right? And we should find a solution to that. So I say fight for it, you can find a place where you can both be happy.
Thank you all for your comments, and it's great to see success stories like you all out there.
Thank you.
So in the chat, I saw before someone asking about atmospheric river or other kind of research topics. So if you guys want to reach out and make connection about some specific topic, maybe you can even, I don't know if here someone want to add something to that post in the chat, but if you guys want to make connection and don't know how to move, you can shoot us an email at our AGU@gmail.com, and we can try to see if we can find some connection for you. It's not that hard to, we know a lot of people in the field, so we should be able to connect you to someone if you need to. And then there was a question about the finance program. It's a NASA program. Many of the attendees here actually got funded over the years, and it's a very competitive one, but it's also a very good opportunity. So just keep trying. Unfortunately, someone was asking if it's just it's open to foreign national. Unfortunately, it's a NASA funding, so I don't think so. But yeah, for US,
finest is actually
is open.
you need to be a student in an American university, but you can be a foreign national.
Yeah, that's what I was actually. I replied privately, but I said yes, you can be foreign national, but for a US university.
You need to be a student in the US.
Yeah, as well as any other NASA fundings, you need to be in the US with your job in the US too. You can be originally from wherever, but let's see. There are Okay, so Viviana just posted the link to our website and our happy hour space in Gather to Town. So if you guys want to keep talking and just chat or have other questions, we can just meet there for a little bit. And I see Fraser is not happy about the international cutoff of NASA. Sorry about that. Yeah, and yeah, I was actually thinking earlier about you know, the question that Yonjin asked, and I'm in between an early career and a mid-career scientist. I'm not ready to do the jump yet on the mid-career part. But what I wanted to ask this thing about, you know, there's this imposter syndrome thing, especially among women, but as well male scientists probably had that as well, have it. And I found the difficulty between the period of your degree when you are just finishing, you don't have all the knowledge to understand what's going on, and when you want to ask questions or you want to propose something, you don't know if it is because you haven't hit that paper yet, or you haven't you know, do enough research in the literature to know everything. So maybe your question could be stupid or stuff like that. And then when you keep going with your postdoc and you actually get some position that you like, and you start asking yourself, well, I don't know as much things as that guy knows. How can I be here? So how did you deal with this? I think it's a transitional period. Some people have it for their entire life. Some people don't have it. I experienced it till I was actually strong enough on my field to feel like, okay, I know what I'm talking about here. But, you know, that transitional period, how did you deal with that?
Well, I got lucky, right? I went to Croatia and to Europe, and then I got a huge European project. There were 15 countries involved in it. It was actually the first European project that Croatia got from, you know, because we entered Union later on. And as a tropical meteorology physicist, I was kind of the only one. So, so, you know, I could even say something wrong and then come tomorrow and say, oh, I said this wrong. What I'm trying to say, I was lucky that I got into the environment where I did not have Dave Raymond or somebody with me every day. So I didn't see that, right? I had to find my own way. I had to find my own path. I had to find my own colleagues. I had to, well, it was a challenge to talk to people from different fields, but it helped how should I say that? Like the way I felt, right? That I can do this without Dave Raymond, that I can do this without whomever. And I had 8 years of that. And then when every time I would come back to the US, I could see how much I grew because I had to have done all that by myself. And I actually, as a PhD, as a student, had the same experience because Dave went on sabbatical, and so I went to Croatia, and all of a sudden I couldn't just go into his office every week and ask him something. And that's when I truly became a good PhD student. So I guess for me it was really easy because the circumstances, I mean, it's never easy. I think you just keep doing your best. You try to put yourself out there somewhere else where those same people are not always there. And just think about it. They have had, I don't know, 10 or 20 more years than you had on studying what you are studying. Imagine yourself 10, 20 years ago where your knowledge was and where it is today. Some of them keep thinking about that all the time, but just really all the time. I don't know, every time I get a review for my paper and it's like 15 pages long and my paper is 10 pages long, I wonder, you know, where do they find the time? but we all have our style, and it doesn't mean that they are better than we are. We're just at a different, well, first of all, we're at a different stage if we are younger, because everybody knows that all the geoscientists get better with age and experience and wisdom and time. Maybe not everybody, but most of them. So there is that. And then the second thing is we all process differently and have different ideas and approach them, you know, come to different, sure Dalia wants to say something about this.
Oh no, I think it's all the same. I mean, honestly, like, you fake it until you make it, right? So like I would go to EGU when I was in grad school, and because that's kind of where the field was, right? And I would like look in awe at all these people, and they all had their groups that they were going to dinner with, and I was just me. And I, you know, and so you start getting up more and more courage to just go and talk to them or ask them about their talk, ask them about papers, and start to kind of, they start to know you, right? You just show up. I think that is the like most important thing, is just to show up. And I think that if people think that, you know, I sometimes used to think like, why are they looking at me? They're not looking at you. Like, they're not even paying attention to you. So you just need to go and make yourself known. And it's easier said than done, but it's huge to be able to just kind of show up and say, all right, let me ask you about your paper. I mean, everybody wants to talk about themselves, so it's usually not a problem.
And then one day it really happens, you know.
And then one day it clicks.
One day
and you're like,
are,
whoa, they want to talk to me. That's
right.
exciting.
Exactly.
Yeah, it does happen. I promise. It doesn't take that long, but yeah, when someone's like, I read your papers, I really want to talk to you. And I'm like, you do? Really? Cool.
Yeah, sometimes I still send emails saying, hey, I'm Lisa Milani. I don't know if you remember me. We talked at one time. And then I get an email back. Of course I remember you. Of course I know you. I'm like, okay. But still, you know, in the background, there is still this feeling like I need to say, do you remember me? But hopefully one day it will go away.
That's not a bad thing. I do it not because I think that they might not remember me, or I don't think about it that much anymore. But or maybe I'm lying because I'm usually overthinking things. But it's always nice to say like, you know, I don't know if you remember me, but blah blah blah. Nothing wrong with that.
And honestly, I mean, I know that this has been such a difficult time to kind of have those side conversations, but use your networks to get introduced to new people, even if it's a virtual meeting, to say, you know, your thesis advisor knows so-and-so who knows so-and-so, and it could be advantageous to talk to them about fill in the blank. Sometimes it's about nothing. It's just that you want to get to know them. Use your networks. And this is one like the early career committee here is a network, right? Use it to understand who knows who and how you can start to understand the field more and get your research known, and grow your own community. So I can't I can't estimate. Yeah, you get it. It's important.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing an amazing job. And I think also that scientists who are decent human beings will never not return your email. Right. Those who don't, you can just forget about them.
Well, don't be afraid to follow up though. Sometimes, you know.
Sure. But in my experience, the great scientists were the most approachable and wanted to talk and wanted to meet new people and wanted to hear new ideas. And, you know, they were just there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Guys, here it's 6:29 Central Time, and probably we need to wrap up. But again, if you want to join us for the happy hour, virtual happy hour, we will be glad to just keep talking. If you have other questions, just feel free to reach out through social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have a mailing list you can subscribe to have we advertise our latest papers. So if you want to have your paper advertised on social media, just fill the form or send us an email. If you don't know where to find the form, we will send a link for you. And it's just all making connection here, making networks. So don't feel afraid to reach out and just ask. We are as you see, we are all young scientists, students, and we just want to help. So if Viviana, you had the link of the...
Yeah, so I added both the Goddard Town link. We're gonna do this every single day this week. So please feel free to join at any time, day.
Yep.
And I also added the link of our technical committee. So shoot us an email, we'll add you to our mailing list. You'll get notifications. Follow us on all the social medias. These guys are amazing. They, created many different channels from nothing. So now we are out there, and if you start follow us, then again, you'll get notified about activities and ways of being involved. And these kind of events are really what help and what will make you part of the network. Okay, next time at AGU, there is no way you should have dinner by yourself. Okay.
Right.
And it happened to me, Dalia. My go-to lunch was a sandwich at Starbucks, eaten probably in my hotel room. So.
Yep. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you want company, use your network.
Exactly.
We'll find you a friend.
Yep, we will. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to Lisa and Yunjin for making this happen.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for attending. Thanks to the speaker again. That was amazing. Really good experiences shared here. And yeah, it was just amazing. Thank you so much. Hopefully we will see you in person next year.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Yunjin.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.